Hello, my name is Hilary Robertson. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. And for this episode, I am really delighted to be joined by pianist Paul Edis, who I heard at the Cadogan Hall at the start of November. And I'm now talking to him about the album excerpts from which he played at the Cadogan Hall. And his album's called The Still Point of the Turning World. And the front cover of it is simply beautiful. As a pianist, composer, and educator, Paul is really up there among the greats. He works regularly with lots of other musicians, including Joe Harrop, who I interviewed a few weeks ago. But he's also played with lots and lots of British jazz greats, including Jim Mullen, Tim Garland, Julian Siegel, Tony Coffey, and actually old friends of mine, Steve Waterman, Ian Bellamy, and Mark Nightingale. He is really one of the leading lights of contemporary jazz, as London Jazz News put it so eloquently. I'm looking forward to interviewing Paul. He really is a fabulous pianist, and I hope you enjoy listening to our conversation. Welcome to Harmonious World. I'm delighted to be joined this time by pianist Paul Edis. Hi, Paul.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to meet you again. And as we were talking about before, I enjoyed the Cadogan Hall gig, which was, I think it was the album launch, wasn't it? Officially,
it was. Well, it was kind of 4 album launches in one evening. In fact, there's a lot going on that evening, and tons of amazing music. So yeah, it's great to hear that people enjoyed it, basically.
Yeah, and of course you were doubling up, weren't you? Because it was not only your solo album, but also the album you'd worked on with Joe Harrop.
Yes, I had different hats on that evening. So I sort of started the concert with my solo piano set, and then went back to the dressing rooms, and then came back out to help with Joe's set, playing piano for that. So it was a lot, like I say, a lot going on, but it was great fun actually, and to see the downstairs. I think all the downstairs was sold out at Cadogan, so it was a really good atmosphere.
Yeah. And it really was. It was one of our first it felt like a real proper gig for the first time for a lot of us. So yeah, it was good. Well, let's hope that we can keep a lid on this horrible virus now and do more of that.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell me about this album. How did it come about?
This is my first album with the Lateralize label. In fact, it's my first album with a label, really, because everything I'd done previous to this was sort of self-release, which anyone who's been through that process will know it's an awful lot of work, and often you feel like you're fighting an uphill battle. So there was that side of it, just having the support of a label, and such a great label as well. It's really, really keen on producing new original music and high artistic aims and everything else. So in that respect, it does feel like starting again. But also, I moved to London in March 2020, and yeah, I know it was great timing.
Yeah.
But this album is the first thing I've done since moving south, since leaving the northeast of England and sort of relocating. So again, it all feels something like a reset, I suppose, and the process of having moved and the fact that we were then locked down meant I kind of did more practice than I've ever done before. I wrote new music. I did all sorts of things, I think, basically to distract myself from the fact that nothing was happening. So in a way, again, it felt like a new start in that sense too, that my playing's kind of gone up a notch and what I'm trying to achieve as well. Yes,
and obviously we met several years ago. It was about 7 years ago, I think, when you were kind of a young, starting out really, and there is a real maturity, I think, to your style now, and that opening set you did at Cadogan Hall was beautiful, and I love this album. It's really
thanks very much.
Yeah, there's something classical about it. The compositions are beautiful, and your style is stunning. It's really good.
Oh, that's very kind. I mean, a few people have mentioned the classical thing, which is interesting because I've always felt like I don't really fit into that or jazz, so I seem to be splitting down the middle somehow. But or sometimes I get sort of described as straight ahead or something. But yeah, with this solo album, there's definitely a kind of a different freedom there, I think, to when I'm playing, for example, with my trio or sextet. And yeah, in terms of the maturity, the album itself's been an interesting process for me, particularly the sort of realizing in the recording, literally on the day of the recording, this feeling of I'm not doing any of this necessarily for anyone else or to. I don't feel any sense of I should do this and maybe I ought to do that, which is how I used to feel a lot more of that sort of baggage when when I've done albums in the past. Not that I kind of regret that. I think it's a process you go through before maybe you finally go, actually, I'm going to do what I want to do, and hopefully people will like it.
Yeah.
So
That definitely comes across. In fact, I think that came across when you were playing, because it was almost as if you were not I don't mean that you were disregarding the audience, but you were playing what you wanted to play. And at the end of each track, when people applauded at the end of each tune, it felt almost as if you were going, oh, thank you, I'm glad you liked it, but I'm going to carry on, Do you
yeah,
know what I
maybe.
mean?
No, I
Yeah.
do. I mean, it's a funny thing because it sounds a bit like you're saying I don't care about my audience, and it's not that. It's just that uh, as a sort of creative musician, you can have so much, like I say, baggage going on about maybe I ought to do this, and to the extent that when I did some of my albums in the past, it was that feeling of I should probably put in a thing a bit like that because that can demonstrate that I can do this. And whereas I think maybe just maturity, maybe circumstance, this time round it was just kind of like, now I'm just going to do I'm going to do these tunes because this is what I want to do. And when I perform so live, like that Cadogan gig, um, I play most of the time. I play with my eyes closed, and I just kind of get into a zone. So there is genuinely a sense quite often that when I finish my song or my piece, that I kind of open my eyes and go, "Oh, there's an audience. I forgot about you there because I was just in my zone." Um, so it's almost like we turn the lights back on when I finish the tune and see everyone sat there watching and hopefully applauding.
Yes. Yes, and that doesn't come across as arrogance, or, as I say, it doesn't come across as you're disregarding the audience. It comes across as if you are giving the audience 100%
Yeah.
of you as a pianist.
Well, yeah, I'd like to think so. It's always tough to know if you can give 100% because it's this battle between, yeah, like hence closing the eyes, trying to stay in the moment, stay in the music, and not let your mind wander onto something completely superfluous or start worrying about, for example, on a gig like that, start thinking, oh, I need to make sure I'm back downstairs for this and need to get that music. Those kind of mundane things can creep in as well. So
Yeah.
it's a high wire kind of balancing act, especially solo piano, because I think the solo thing in one respect is brilliant because you don't have to worry about anyone else. But
No.
then occasionally you have that really, that moment of, oh, there's no one else to rely on. I just need to, there's no one to bail me out here if anything goes wrong. There's no, you don't have that support from let's say a bass player and a drummer there, just occasionally if you lapse in concentration. So it is a kind of a special thing doing a solo performance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I do enjoy it.
Yeah. Oh, clearly, clearly. So tell me about the recording process. How did that happen?
Well, we started chatting to the label in about January of this year, so 2021, about it. And very quickly, we'd got to the idea of doing something, basically, and doing this solo album. I managed to find, based on recommendations, sort of asked various piano players what's the best place to go in town, sort of thing. The studio, Masterchord Studio in North London, which has an amazing Steinway D piano. So it's sort of one of the best you can get, and it's a nice one of those as well because it's been really looked after. And we went in I think it was the February half term, went in and recorded in a day, recorded loads of stuff. And interestingly, I like I said earlier, there was a slight sense of, as the day progressed, feeling out what this album was. So I had various concepts in mind, and I took along a few extra things, and some of the extra things ended up supplanting the original ideas, which is just sometimes how it goes. I think, you can have these really clear ideas, and then you get in the moment, in the studio, in the acoustic or whatever it is, and it all starts to make more sense. Especially because that piano itself, and I suppose the overall sound of the album, the producer Adam Sinclair, who I've worked with a lot over the years, he had this thing of try and play very quietly, and get this overall sound, trying to imagine it from the point of view of someone being sat at home, and it's almost like you're in their living room when they're playing, and actually the way it was recorded as well. We made sure that well, I don't really understand half this stuff, but the aim was to get the mics really close into the piano, so it's almost like you are literally in the room with the piano, rather than in a concert hall in row Z kind of thing.
Yeah, and that definitely does come across, because sometimes you listen to albums that have been recorded at live, especially solo piano pieces where they've been recorded at live, in massive halls. You can hear that. Whereas this, it does sound very personal from you to me, the listener.
Yeah, well, that's the intention. It's always, I mean, music is about communication. It's about trying to have a nice chat with whoever it
Yeah.
is who's on the other end through music, I suppose, or yeah, a conversation with them. I know they can't participate in a sense, but there's something about the way the silence works, and everything else, that they're part of that. Even on a recording, I think.
Yeah.
Bit philosophical, that, isn't it?
I know, it's very deep. That comes across, and I hope that you can retain that as you become more experienced and more, you'll obviously be playing more, and that sort of thing. And I hope that intimacy, that musical intimacy, really sort of stays, because it feels like you've got that in spades.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, no, well, thank you. And I think some of that as well is about having a bit of courage, courage of conviction. So, for example, the first track on the album, Dig Deep, which is what I actually played to open the whole of that gig at Cadogan, that in some respects is quite an intimidating thing to play, because it's so spacious, and there's this it's so kind of, I mean, it's kind of hopeful but incredibly sad at the same time. People keep telling me it makes them cry.
Yeah.
So, so when it came to that gig, the Cadogan thing, I thought maybe I should start with something a bit more, a bit more upbeat, get the audience in a good mood. But then I thought, no, the whole point of this is I'm bringing them into this kind of really quiet world, this very sense of stillness and emotion and
Yeah.
everything else, not necessarily, which again, yeah, it just goes against your natural thing of, the first number's normally supposed to be something a bit loud and upbeat, good, fast tempo, that kind of thing. So it was
Yeah.
something about that as well, I think, about courage of convictions.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, obviously, I know a bit about your background, but my audience probably doesn't. So, can you tell me a bit about how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Well, so I've sort of told you about moving down from the northeast, from that was in March 2020, as I say, perfect timing, but it had its benefits in a sense. Um, but so before that, for about since 2003, 2006, I'd been based in the northeast, again, where, because that's actually where I'm from. I mean, sometimes Northerners tell me I sound like a Southerner, but Southerners tend to say I sound like a Northerner. So yes, that is where I'm from originally, from a place called Chesley Street, near Durham. So I was based up there. I did various gigs, and I actually set up concert series and did education work, all sorts of stuff, whilst kind of keeping the performance side going as well, and releasing albums on my own. Um, and then, yeah, in kind of the last 2 or 3 years before moving, I kind of started to feel that slightly itchy feet feeling, and just wanting to be where it felt like the party was happening, I guess. It always was this feeling with London. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
Just to be around it, you kind of get sucked into loads more things, and actually that is what's happened. I feel like loads of things have happened despite there being a pandemic, and it's just nice to get a change of scene, I suppose.
Yeah.
And the irony is that I did actually study in London when I was 18, so 2003 to 2006 I was based in London, and then moved back. the Northeast, and then I was kind of following this. So I when I studied in London, I was doing composition and straight classical composition as well, and similarly, then I went and did an MA and a PhD at York University, which was kind of much more contemporary classical music. Was the kind of angle, but all the while, like this kind of jazz things going on. I was doing gigs, arranging things for the big band, and they felt like kind of separate worlds, I think, at that stage. And I was almost encouraged to keep it that way, just because, just for getting through some of those qualifications, I suppose. But at some point, thankfully, I think they've started to meld, and it's just what I do, with these kind of diverse influences of different traditions, without, like I say, without ruining either of them, with hopefully.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But there is a clear technical, classical background behind what you're doing. I mean, maybe that's the musician in me hearing that. I don't know, but there is definitely something classical in its nature behind behind the improvisation.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Good. I do think I do bring, I suppose, certain compositional, classical or Western classical compositional approaches to the way I approach jazz. But I think some of that's in there as well. Sometimes we just don't realize it is. There's certain rhetorical devices, for example, like the rule of three.
Exactly.
Which you get in Dexter Gordon solos, which you can,
yeah.
you can liken that to Beethoven piano sonatas and things, all sorts of weird things like that. But also in the sense of I like things to be quite neat, I suppose, which is a classical tradition, isn't it? The idea of not wasting any notes, kind of keeping everything. And I like melody as well, which again is often, I think, is one of those things jazz musicians, it feels like, sometimes steer away from for harmony and rhythm, which are obviously big things as well. But melody, I think I've always felt like I'm naturally drawn towards melodies, and writing melodies, and loving people like Gershwin and the American songbook writers, for their simplicity, but elegance of their melodic writing.
Yes, and I noticed at Cadogan Hall that there was some of the pieces, you'd get a melody, and then you'd catch a glimpse of it through the middle, and then you'd get another one, and then it would come back at the end, and so it did feel like there was a real melodic composition going on. I think that might be where the classical thing is coming from. As you say, very Gershwin, Debussy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and also it's just interesting. I think there's all sorts of overlaps. Like Gershwin, Cole Porter, all of those kind of that tradition. They'd all studied the classical thing as well. So with like that's possibly another way in that's rubbed off on me a little bit, just about form and the way things are structured and so on. So
yes, yeah. Right, so the Still Point of the Turning World, where is the best place for people to get hold of it, to listen to it, as far as you're concerned? Because obviously we want to put money in your pocket so that you can get out and perform, and do more. So,
well, I mean, you can always get copies, assuming I remember them, on gigs.
Yes.
So I've got gigs coming up in Newcastle and down here in London. So yeah, come and find me on a gig, and that means that's sort of killing two birds with one stone. Then you get to hear it live.
Yes.
But otherwise, there's a Bandcamp page that I have that has the album on, and there's now soon certainly there'll be vinyl available as well. So you can get it vinyl, CD, download of Bandcamp. It's on Spotify. It's kind of everywhere. We're relying on the audience to find it where they like to listen to it.
Right.
Bandcamp in general is the best for artists nowadays.
Definitely. I try and point my audiences to that where possible, because it does seem to be, and they were doing brilliant things in lockdown in terms of helping money get into the pockets of musicians. So that's really good. Yeah, very good. Okay, well, I will point everyone in the direction of Bandcamp and your own website so that people can find out where you're going to be in the new year. So hopefully people will be able to go and listen to you.
Yeah, well, I do hope to see some people at my gigs.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, great stuff. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Paul. In the show notes, you will find links to his own website and to Bandcamp, which is always a good place to find the artists that I've interviewed. Most of them have got a Bandcamp presence. At the start of this podcast, you were listening to Dig Deep, which is indeed what Paul started his concert at the Cadogan Hall with. Now I'm playing Start Over, which is another track on The Still Point of the Turning World. Please do like and share, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you're listening to me. Thank you so much for joining me once more on Harmonious World. And remember to share what you are good at to make this world a little more harmonious. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.